they just hit the button on their Fitbit or Apple Watch and they go, oh, look, my heart rate is at 94 beats per minute right now. So what does that mean? It's 2 p.m. on a Wednesday and you're at 94 beats per minute. What does that mean? You know what that means? Nothing. It means absolutely nothing. It just means it's a snapshot in time without context and without looking at trends and variation. It means nothing.
Yeah.
The only two times that your biometrics really provide the most insightful understanding is nocturnally and during activity and immediately post activity, right? So, so nocturnally when you're sleeping, if your biometrics are changing while you're sleeping, good or bad, that is indicative of many different things, depending on what's going on. I mean, right now in this sort of COVID era, we're involved in some research because you could be showing signs of developing some type of, we can't identify COVID, but we could talk about a respiratory condition because there's things changing in your biometrics, and that shows up days before you would have symptoms. So that's when you're pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic. So by the time you actually are sick, it's kind of too late, and especially in terms right now, everyone's worried about spreading this. But your biometrics will change at night, and that is more indicative of a transformation than temperature, because you could just be running, you could be coming in, it's 100 degrees here in California, Southern California right now, you come in from outside, I scan 101, well, maybe I was running to get into the hotel because I was hot, and then the door will slam in my face and won't let me in, and also too, some people run cold, some people run hot.
Right.
So we don't even talk about that. The fact that the variation of temperature is actually quite wide. Women's temperature, changes with ovulation cycles. All of these things, so really all that matters is trends over time relative to your own baseline. Comparing yourself to a general population is not, is maybe going to give you some insights. A lot of people are competitive, so it's like, I want to be in the top, 15 percentile.
Yeah.
My resting heart rate is better than your resting heart rate. My HRV is higher than your HRV. Well, some people just maybe their baseline HRV is below the norm, but they could be incredibly resilient. It's just a factor of the way their neurophysiology is wired. So you can't always look at these. And HRV is definitely one of the most important metrics, but also one of the most misunderstood and probably the most difficult to quantify as well.
Yeah, and honestly, you're speaking my language right now is because I've been using a device that's tracking all of that, and I'm trying to make sense of it to include heart rate variability. And I don't know how many times I've reread the definition, read articles,
right?
And I'm still scratching my head like, okay, it's like the most important thing, but it's like this squishy thing that keeps slipping all over the place. I just don't even understand.
Yeah, because there's all these things. You once you go down that rabbit hole, you start looking at low frequency versus high frequency versus very low frequency, and then you start to see really weird things. And I'll give you a real life example of something I encounter, with us as a company, is somebody who was admitted to the ER, and their HRV shot over 100, and this is somebody who said their HRV had never gone over like 45, and so they were in a crisis, and the way their body reacted at that particular moment for that particular individual was they put them in a profound parasympathetic state to deal with the crisis. So you would think, if HRV was a equals B scenario, you would say, oh, this person is incredibly sick and their HRV is going to drop down. Right. But it actually went higher than it had ever gone.
Wow.
And that was their body's way of kind of protecting them. Their fight or flight reaction was actually to create a high level of parasympathetic activation to deal with the situation.
Wow. Fascinating. Goes to show you, like we were saying, each individual is different and how we're going to respond to things.
Yeah. So that, and again, I've heard of other cases of this, and I've talked to physicians because I work with a lot of physicians as part of what we do, and that's not entirely uncommon. They will see sometimes in people admitted into the ER where their HRV is shooting up to deal with crisis, right? So what we would think fight or flight, HRV drops. If we're going to flight, going to fight or flight. Not always the case. So that's where it becomes, like I said, a very confusing metric where you can't always say, high is good, low is bad. High is better, and low is worse. It could mean a lot of different things. You need context. You need to look at the individual. You need, a lot of extra data points.
So what are some, in a 101 version, HRV defined? What are the components that kind of aggregate up to give you that number?
Okay, yeah. For anyone who's not familiar with this, it's a very important metric that we couldn't measure through wearables previously. But it's basically all humans, and this is not something that's unique to any individual. All humans have what's called an autonomic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system is broken down into the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic is the fight or flight. So when we go into a sympathetic state, our body gets ready for fight or flight. So we get ready to face a enemy or a threat of some kind. So, we have things where extra blood gets directed to our muscles, the digestion, blood to the digestive organs will slow down significantly so that it is able to be ready for the extremities in case you need to run or fight, for example. And a lot of other things happen to sort of activate the body. You might get some rushes of adrenaline. So the body's in this state of readiness. And the opposite, when you go into a parasympathetic state, which is rest and digest, is fight or flight, your HRV tends to drop. So low HRV means fight or flight. And then the alternate side is parasympathetic activation, and that's the rest and digest, where the blood goes from the extremities to the digestion to digest your food. Your muscles and your overall state should go into relaxation, and you should feel safe and calm, and your breathing would slow, and the HRV would go up. So the interesting thing is that we live in this world where we're always on. So, even when so if you think about it in the past, even just looking at a very real scenario, you finished work at 5, you went home, there was no cell phone, there was no laptops, nobody was bothering you at work, for example, and you could go into a deep state of rest and digest. You would eat your dinner with your family, you'd chill out on the couch, and you'd go to bed. Well, now what happens? You leave the office, or now we're not even going to offices. We're at home all the time, working all the time. Yeah, you go up and down the stairs, if that, or in and out of another room. And you never actually get to a good state of parasympathetic activation, which would put you in a state of readiness to go to sleep. And so sleep disorders are just rampant right now in our society. And that leads to all these other health problems, obesity, type 2 diabetes is also, insulin resistance is tied to sleep. You're not producing hormonal balance unless you're getting good, enough sleep at night. Also, even cognitively, if you don't get enough REM sleep, you're just gonna probably be, a little bit cognitively brain fogged, or just even unhappy, angry, or cranky. So it all fits together. It's a complex puzzle. And HRV is probably one of the best metrics we have to look at where you are in that cycle. And so that's why monitoring HRV matters.